closed captioning, which you can access by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen. All participants are going to be muted until the audience participation portion of tonight's event begins. And at that point, I will invite you to raise your vertical hand by clicking on the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen, and you'll be invited to unmute and ask your question in turn. So you will also see a link in the chat right now inviting you to visit the Plan2040 website, download the plans, and submit your comments. You can submit those comments by November 15th, and we really do hope that you will. So with all of that behind us, and without further ado, let me introduce our main speaker, York County Executive Stuart Pittman.
Thanks, Matt. I don't know that I'm the main speaker, but I'm one of the speakers. I'll probably say the least. But you may have noticed, if you're listening, that we've done a lot of town halls about the GDP. In fact, there have been a lot of meetings about the GDP. And from my perspective, that's appropriate because it's certainly the most important thing that I'm going to do while I'm in this office. It's I think the reason a lot of people voted for me, because they knew that we had this plan coming up, and that I shared a vision that I think a lot of the people in this county share, which is that we have a beautiful, beautiful county, and we have natural resources in this county that we don't want to lose, because once you pave them over, they're gone. It's really hard to undo. So we want a clean Chesapeake Bay. We want the waterways that feed into the bay to be clean and have life in them. And we want our soil to be healthy, and we want to have trees, and we want to have outdoor spaces that people can go for their physical health, their mental health, and quality of life. So the general development plan, we've had a lot of meetings about it. We've divided most of them geographically, but what we're doing now that we have a draft out, is we're doing 3 virtual town halls, entitling them Green Future, Smart Future, and Inclusive Future. And we're gonna take chunks of the general development plan, divide them up that way. And so we're gonna be talking largely about the natural environment and that part of the plan tonight. And I think I can speak for most people when I say that I certainly have a very deep, almost spiritual connection to the natural world that created us, the natural world that sustains us. And everybody has a different relationship with it. Some of us are tree huggers and go camping all the time. Others just know that when we go outside and we sit down under a tree in the summer, it makes us feel good. But we know that we have to preserve it. We have to make it accessible. That's where the equity piece comes in, and we'll have a session on that as well, so that it's available to everybody. And we know that it's not easy, because we know that there are development pressures in this county, unlike maybe anywhere. I mean, we are a place that the regional development interests want to be. We're between Baltimore and DC. We're by the Chesapeake Bay with all these beautiful inlets. You can make a lot of money building houses and selling them in this part of the world. And so, of course, there are people who want to do that. And what we have to do as a county is to manage that growth pressure. And I think what's happened in the past, to be perfectly straight about it, is that there have been plans put forward, like this general development plan, that have been pretty good. Small area plans, pretty good. Green infrastructure plan, Greenway plan, they're all there, but that they haven't been adhered to. And so a lot of people don't have a lot of faith that local government is going to actually implement what they put forward. I think people have a lot of hope, though. They would not be participating at the levels they are if they didn't have a lot of hope that we will actually implement what we put forth. And I just want to note and encourage people, when they look at the GDP, to particularly look at, it's actually pages 64 to 127 of the main plan, the smaller version, not the background, but the actual plan is specific strategies that are proposed. And some of these are legislative, some of these are regulatory. And if you just even look at the section on the natural environment, which is pages 64 to 76 of that, there are 6 policy areas. And I went through and I counted every single strategy. And some of these strategies are big. They're legislation that's big. And there were 93 of them. So I know that our team has worked really hard. Lori Rhodes has spent years going through in Office of Planning and Zoning, going through and marking all the legislative changes that she would like to see in the code. Matt Johnson came in as our environmental policy director, first person in that position in the county, and has been talking to everybody in county government as well as advocates and coming up with a list of things that need to be done to protect the environment and also to drive the development into the areas where we think it's appropriate, transit-oriented development, smart growth, and the kind of development that is improves the quality of our residents' lives. So it's detailed, it's ambitious. A couple of the things that are really ambitious, I think right off the bat when we get this thing through, is we're going to have legislation that a bill for natural resource protection that's going to require every developer on every parcel to identify the natural features, the steep slopes, the wetlands, the priority forest areas, the specimen trees, and map those. And that's the first thing. That's the first thing that you look at. And then to do the approval process with performance zoning, where you actually get credit for protecting those features. There's also going to be a comprehensive conservation strategy. So we take the land preservation parks and rec plan that we have and the green infrastructure plan and this Plan 2040, and our Citizens Environmental Committee is going to be looking at all those and working with Matt to put together a comprehensive strategy. I want to thank the Citizens Environmental Committee, which is a new commission, I should say, is a new commission of county government created just in our administration. They're all here. Thank you for being here. I know that this is the first hour of your meeting, and then you will go on maybe late into the night, continuing to talk about these things. But thank you for your service. Your involvement in the GDP process has been very important. I know that you've been watching it closely. I want to just say something about all the agencies and all the folks who are going to be responsible for implementation of this plan and who have been involved in putting it together. So it's not just a one agency thing, which is why Matt's job is so hard. It's also why Lori Rhodes' job, a new job, is going to be so hard, working with all the agencies on land use issues, because we have Office of Planning and Zoning, who does the long range planning and also does subdivision approvals, who are going to be working on this. We have Department of Public Works, and within the Public Works, watershed restoration and protection. We actually have Eric Michelson here talking about the projects that they're doing for the environment. We've got Rec and Parks, and we have Rick Anthony here, who actually creates these beautiful spaces that are open to the public. And that's a really important part of this strategy. And then we have inspections and permits that tries to prevent all of the erosion and sediment coming off of construction sites, and does other inspections on projects, and the health department and transportation, and everybody's involved in this. And it is a monumental task to keep everybody on task so that we're really managing the growth of this county in the way that the people of this county want. And then most importantly, probably the most important part of all this is the advocates and the scientists that give us a lot of this information that we can use, and the advocates who encourage the elected officials like me to actually hold our feet to the fire to implement this work. And in Anne Arundel County, those advocates, we saw your power when we passed the Forest Conservation Bill, and I believe that we will see your power in the coming years as we work on other bills to support the environment. So I'm gonna stop on that, I think. But my main message here is just that this is, it's just another plan. But if you look at this plan and you look at all the implementation pieces that are part of it, the annual report that will be filed, the regional plans that will come after, the 9 regional plans where residents in their communities will be making much more specific plans, and the fact that zoning doesn't happen until after those regional plans, it really is a very, very different general development plan. And, you know, people have asked for teeth, and I believe this baby has teeth. I think it's going to be very hard for future elected officials to ignore this plan because of the way the protections that have been put into it. So I'm going to pass it back to Matt and hear from the real experts.
Yes, thank you, County Executive. And as you heard from the County Executive, 93 goals in just the environmental section alone, and there are other sections we'll be touching on tonight that have to do with Parks and Recreation. I'm going to hand it over first to Steve Kai-Ziegler, our Planning and Zoning Officer, and the leader of all of this whole crew who put together this entire document. And Steve is going to tell us about the things that he sees in this document that are really important for you to know and that he's really excited about. And then we'll switch gears and hand it off to a couple of other folks on the line today who will tell you about their most excited portions of the document as well. So Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Matt. Again, Steve Kai-Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer. I'm going to say it's always difficult to follow the County Executive. You do a fantastic job of providing the overview. And I think what I want to do, I want to highlight something you alluded to, actually more than alluded to, but the implementation side of things, because I think that is the area that our citizens struggle the most based on past practices, and we simply have to do a better job. So as it relates to the environment, there's a couple areas I want to cover, and I'm going to ask everybody to listen to some words I'm going to be using as we talk about how we're going to do things. Plan 2040 includes a variety of strategies to better protect the environment by increasing protections and tracking during the development process. And some of those are going to be, and just pay attention, amending the natural features section of Article 17 to address habitats of rare, threatened, endangered species. And this will include land outside of the critical area. Second, require that development plans graphically depict the site's field delineated existing conditions and identified natural features. This is a part about what the County Executive mentioned in performance zoning. Third, prohibit disturbance within 25 feet of ephemeral streams unless the disturbance is related to water quality, improvement projects, stormwater management, or existing utility crossings. Fourth, revise the landscape manual to require native plantings within stream and wetland buffers where not currently vegetated. Fifth, better enforcement of critical area buffer requirements. And last in this area is establish performance zoning criteria in Articles 17 and 18, including maximum impervious surface limitations and minimum landscape requirements for each of our zoning districts. The second major thing I want to cover is Plan 2040 includes a variety of strategies to better protect environmentally sensitive areas within the critical area. That include comprehensively updating the county's critical area program, which will include amendments to sections of Articles 17 and 18, create a county habitat protection program, and update a very old 1988 Habitat Assessment Manual guidance document that's used in review of development applications in the critical area. If you noticed, I used implementation words in what I was describing. Often in a comprehensive plan or a general development plan, you will see a lot of potential things that you will consider doing. We're making a commitment to do these things. And we've, throughout the plan, we've provided a variety of mechanisms that will essentially give citizens, our constituents, a report card to grade how well we are implementing this plan and all of our future plans, whether that's through appointed implementation advisory groups, the county council, but there's a variety of ways to, I'm going to say, check on our progress. And obviously, if keep our nose to the grindstone. So I think the biggest difference we're making in this GDP versus other ones is a true commitment to implement the plan. So that's just a couple comments. And I think they fold very well with what the county executive is trying to get across. So that's my little part.
Thanks, Steve. And don't believe that he just has a little part. He's got a big part to play in all this, and I really thank him for walking us through some of the really important goals. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eric Michelson. He's our director of our new Bureau of Watershed Protection and Restoration. And Eric, you had a pretty good day today. You got a new grant out on the streets today to bring community stormwater solutions to Anne Arundel County. So congratulations on that. And now I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about your favorite things that deal with stormwater in this plan.
Thanks. Yeah, Matt, I'll discuss that program a little bit later in the meeting. But one of the things that I really wanted to reiterate was what the county executive said about the coordination between the agencies. On these environmental topics, it really is critical to be able to have coordination between planning and zoning, between inspections and permits, public works, and rec and parks, so that we're all rowing in the same direction on these issues. Because my organization, as Matt said, is really focused on correcting the sins of the past, if you will, in terms of trying to restore the developed landscape and to reduce the impacts from that. But that work really ends up being for naught if we aren't trying to figure out how we develop more smart, more intelligently into the future. And so having a good working relationship with Steve and Greg Africa and IMP and Rick, and working with their staff on various work groups is incredibly critical to getting these things done. So some of the topic issues in the natural environment section of the plan that I really want to highlight are committing to working with planning and zoning and inspections and permits to update the county's stormwater manual, look at updated precipitation figures, look at the way that flooding issues or that the existing regulations do or don't protect against flooding downstream and upstream for neighbors when those projects are built, and how do we make sure that we don't make those situations worse or have people buy homes that are subject to flooding because they were built in areas where they shouldn't have been. And I think there is a broad scale commitment to trying to update those rules so that we can be more protective in that way. One of the things that Matt mentioned was the new program that we've rolled out with the administration support to have a pilot program where we're looking at acquiring existing flood-prone properties throughout the county to acquire and then demolish some of those parcels so that they can be reconverted back into natural resource areas, and so that the county doesn't end up spending lots and lots of money trying to engineer the way out of a fix for a parcel that probably shouldn't have been built on in the first place. So I think the commitment to looking at that as a tool in the toolbox is incredibly powerful. I've heard a lot from folks in surrounding jurisdictions that they're excited to see how that goes. And we've rolled that out with the Chesapeake Bay Trust today, as Matt said. One of the other things that I wanted to mention on this front is that the county has access to some really great GIS resources. And I've got GIS staff within my program. Steve has GIS staff within his program, and Rick has some within his program as well. And I think there's a broad feeling internally among county staff that we'd really like to have a way to get that information out in a more user-friendly way to the public, to get that information, including natural resource layer information, out to the public in a user-friendly way. And in talking with Steve's staff, they've got the GDP work at the top of their list right now, but when that lets up a bit, I think we'll have an opportunity to really work very closely with them to roll out a top-notch tool for the public to be able to have access to, and really to be able to have access to a lot of those data resources that county staff do currently, and that the public has some access to at this point, but that aren't really as user-friendly as they should be in the 21st century. So we're committed to working with our sister agencies on these issues to really try to make sure that new development going forward minimizes the impact on local waterways, and of course, committed to our mission of improving the existing developed landscape so that we can improve water quality and protect quality of life in Anne Arundel County. So thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate it. And everyone online and watching at home, please forgive us if we slip into kind of inside baseball jargon every once in a while. We live and breathe this document. So GIS, what Eric was talking about, that is a geographic information system. That's a fancy term for maps. We are excited to get all the maps that we have about all of our natural resources, our critical forests, our critical habitat areas up online for all of you to view. So that's really what Eric was talking about there. Thanks, Eric. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rick Anthony, our director of the Department of Recreation and Parks, who probably at first, whenever we said come and join us on an environmental talk, he said, well, I do greenways and I do agricultural preservation, but where's the parks talk? Well, we think it fits in a lot of the areas of the plan. So we'll actually probably be talking about parks on many of these virtual town halls. But Rick, why don't you tell us how parks fit into this portion of the plan?
No, thanks, Matt. You're right. The GDP certainly lays the foundation for a very important plan that the county executive actually alluded to, our land preservation park and recreation plan, which actually guides our capital projects and policies into the future for every 5 years. So we're coming up on that plan in 2022 to revise that. So the timing of this is perfect. You know, as we get this passed and then move into the regional plans and begin our update on our LPPRP, is certainly important. But what I was really happy to see is how even that our current plan was already integrated into this GDP. And some of the highlights, if I can just, mention, was the proximity and equity analysis. Our last LPPRP was actually the first time that we included that analysis in there, and we were very excited about that. Proximity basically means that everybody deserves an opportunity to live in close distance to a park or a greenway or some sort of other recreation amenity. And the equity piece is that all of our citizens, no matter what their socioeconomical disadvantages or advantages, also deserve to have a quality rec amenity or park in their area. So we look forward to putting more teeth to that in the new GDP, to discussing the areas that has already been identified as areas of need in our county. And as Eric alluded to, I think we all work very closely together, and even including Pam Brown's plan, Poverty Amongst Plenty, is certainly helping us to continue to guide us in our decisions and focus those resources in the areas that, quite frankly, we've kind of neglected for a long time. And I think as a department, we are making progress in that area, but certainly we can do a lot more. And another thing that kind of excited me about reviewing this current draft was also the continued effort to acquire more land. We have constantly gotten criticized for buying property and not having enough money to do anything on them, but it's very nearsighted when you consider that we certainly don't live in a time where our resources are unlimited. We know that there is a limited amount of green space, a limited amount of forest, a limited amount of park land. So we need to do everything we can to make sure that we are protecting it. And I think the acreage was about 750 acres for the future. And, we certainly want to be able to meet that target. Not just for recreation land, but again, for conservation, for stream restoration, as Eric mentioned, and just to protect our natural resources. And this is something that, again, it's something that we need to consider 20, 30, 40 years from now, not just in our current climate. So we certainly look forward to that and are excited about the opportunities we have being a part of this whole conversation in Rec and Parks.
Thanks, Rick. And I can speak on behalf of the administration and the Citizens Environmental Commission. We're certainly excited to work with you and your staff on that new LPPRP. Sorry, I did it right there. Land Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan. Okay, all right, I got it out. I wanted to introduce a couple more members of our panel here tonight, and we actually have about 5 minutes left of our portion of the agenda. So Lori Rhodes is here with us, and she is our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer of Land Use. Lori, do you want to say just a couple things?
Good evening, everyone. Like the county executive said, I have a lot of work ahead of me because I'm going to be overseeing our plan to implement the code through the regulatory tools, which is the zoning and development code. So I'm going to be paying close attention to the natural features section because we've already planned to update the code. So I've assembled a team. We're doing research. We're going to be looking at best models that are out there for ordinances, and we're going to be prepared to implement this tool weave in the language that said it has to be consistent with the plan. Otherwise, it's just a document that sits on the shelf and we continue the bad practices of the past, which we're not going to do under this administration. So I'm very excited to be with the county executive team, working with Steve, Rick, Chris Phipps, Greg Africa, Matt, and the rest of the Pittman staff to update the code. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Lori, and we are absolutely looking forward to you being there as well. Now all the emails for legislative requests will come to both me and you. So, and the last member of our panel tonight is Pam Jordan. Pam, I think that your video's off, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew that you were here. She's our Deputy CAO of Health and Human Services. Pam, did you want to say a few things?
Yes, thank you, Matt. So Health and Human Services is interwoven into all of this plan, and I have to reflect on some words that our county executive often says, is that we measure our work and our impact in terms of health and wellness. So every part of this plan has to do with health and human services. Our waterways, the equity lens we apply to the plan, certainly the things that Rick talked about, our open space and making sure there's equity in terms of land being having open space and parks. And then I just want to thank the Office of Planning and Zoning. In my former role as the Director of Aging and Disabilities, I noticed in the last General Development Plan that aging and disabilities had very little in it. And thank you for giving a voice to the fastest growing population in Anne Arundel County and the vision that our older adults and people with disabilities have for a better environment. So thank you. And it's a fabulous team to work with. Thanks to all my colleagues for a great presentation this evening.
Thanks, Pam, and that's a great reminder that there are specific goals and policies in there to provide park and recreational opportunities to all those communities beyond just the equity analysis. So thanks. So that concludes our portion of the agenda. Unless County Executive, did you have any last words before we open it up for questions?
No, I want to hear the questions.
Great. So that's what we're going to do now. So if you all have a question, there should be a raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. And I will be controlling, I will be pressing a little button that says allow to talk. So I will read off your name and press that allow to talk button. You'll be invited to unmute yourself and then you may ask your question. So first up is Jennifer Richards. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hello, my name's Jennifer Richards. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. County Executive Pittman, this is my second time talking to you this week because I'm a parent and a teacher. So I also came on Tuesday to hear your last meeting. I was very impressed with your plan. My community and I are currently facing a project put forth by DPW to control the stormwater in our community. We weren't in support of this plan, and we were told, well, they're going to take the path of least resistance. I have contacted personally constituent services. I am not hearing back from them. I know, Mr. Michelson, I asked you directly to come down. I'd still love you to come down. Mr. Pittman, we'd love for you to come down. I guess what I'm asking is, what should we expect as community members? I see your plan. I'm very excited, especially about the stormwater pieces. What can we expect? You know, how should the county react to citizens that are worried about, you know, their natural communities? What should we do? I guess I'm just getting stonewalled, so I'm not sure. I see what you're putting forth, and I just want to know. It's just not matching up with what we're hearing back, I guess. So I just wanted to talk directly to you and Mr. Michelson. If you could come down or give me a hint at who I need to talk to.
What's your community? Just say that.
Distillery
It sounds
Bay,
like Eric might know. Where?
Distillery Bay in
Distillery Bay. Okay.
Lakeshore, Pasadena.
Go ahead, Eric, and then I'll jump in.
Sure. So Jennifer, appreciate the question. One of the issues is that with the creation of the Bureau of Watershed Protection, basically the infrastructure management staff from our highways division rolled up under my management as of July. And so they were the ones who were handling this effort initially in Sillery Bay. And I've been, gathering information essentially from them. And the project is not going anywhere without, complete buy-in from the community association and the surrounding neighbors. I understand there's some contentious issues there, and we have no interest in doing anything that's going to impair the water quality for the beach there at Sillery Bay. We're very interested in working with all the stakeholders and trying to get a better handle on what the direction forward can be there. And one of the issues that we've been running into is that we've needed to get our consultants and MDE out to do a wetland delineation of the areas, just to get a sense of what the resources are, so that we know what we're working with and what can be impacted or what can't be impacted, so that we can even have an informed conversation. And so I think my understanding from staff is that we haven't gotten that go-ahead from Sillery Bay yet to do that on their property, and that's been a holdup. But I'm happy to come out and talk with the community, as long as there's a recognition that we can't really move forward with anything. We can't engage our consultant in any way until we've got a better sense of the lay of the land. But I'm happy to talk with you, and I see Michelle Sanders is on the call as well. And come out and discuss it. But there's, you have nothing to be concerned about in terms of DPW forcing a project on the community that they don't want at this point.
Thank you. The county was out. I spoke to them directly, and they said it did meet the criteria for wetlands. And I don't want to take time on one neighborhood, but you happened to be on the call, so I was very excited that maybe I could talk to you in some way. So you're both welcome to come out. We'd love to have you and have a day at the beach and talk more about it.
Let me just add that I meet every week with the constituent services staff, and they bring the issues that they're hearing about. And so I've been following this one, and so I'll continue to follow it. At some point, I'll get out there if it looks like my presence would be helpful. But on these stormwater, I know that this is a DPW stormwater because of a road, and there's a lot of concern about the impact of what that would be. But in the county, all over the place, there's been development projects where the stormwater management systems have failed miserably, and then the developer walks away. Homeowners are left holding the bag, and so. I talked a lot about this during the campaign. People talked to me about it during the campaign, and the council did pass a bill. I'm signing it tomorrow, actually. That has it's a warranty bill requiring the developer, when they implement stormwater practices, to stand behind them, and any damage that gets done as a result of their failure, then they're responsible for the first 2 years. And so I don't know how that works in terms of a public works situation. I hope they're also required to stand behind the stormwater on what they do. But it's been really frustrating for residents of this county when stormwater management does not do its job.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. And for those of you who do raise their hand, I also have to press a button that says lower hand if you do not. So don't feel offended if I press that button, and try to move on to the next hand that is raised. All right, I see one here. That is Jim Lyons. You are on the line.
Well, thank you, Matt and Eric and Stuart. I appreciate the opportunity to join the conversation. So I too want to focus a little bit on stormwater, but I think I want to step back and ask what I hope is a simple question. I realize, and I think Lori, was it, example, I mean, it illustrates the challenge of dealing with projects as they proceed, and the many challenges of trying to kind of catch up in dealing with some of the stormwater issues we face. But the GDP, particularly the environmental component, provides us a unique opportunity to step back and I think look at that long-term vision and what we're trying to achieve through the watershed restoration work that Eric is leading, through the stormwater management issues we face, and even I think, Stuart, in implementing the bill you're going to sign that hopefully assigns more responsibility for that to developers. And I'm just curious when and how we kind of frame that larger vision for the county as a whole. and translate that into specific water quality goals. And then I think boil that down to the kind of land conservation measures we have to put in place, perhaps the land acquisition strategies that are going to be essential to achieving those outcomes. Is there a place in the process, the GDP process, where that all comes together so citizens can understand what we're trying to achieve, and more importantly, how it might affect the regions they're in or the particular neighborhoods in which they reside?
So if I could take that one for just a moment and hand
Be
it,
my guest, Matt.
yeah, sure, and hand it over to Eric Michelson, because Eric actually runs in his shop, they did watershed assessments of every watershed in this county. And that is where a lot of the detailed information about what is there in that watershed and where we need to get to from a water quality perspective is located. And Eric, if you just want to talk a little bit about how those assessments are used and how they tie in with the plan.
Right. So again, as over the course of the past 15 years or so, Public Works has been leading and completing these watershed assessments for each of the watersheds within the county that identify, among other things, priorities for restoration and preservation. And we've used that mapping of the priorities for restoration to drive and target our restoration work that we've pursued so far. So sort of looking at the areas where we can get the best bang for the buck, where there's the best opportunity for restoration. And it doesn't always work out because we're beholden to the property owners oftentimes in some of these cases. But by and large, we've been able to use that as our roadmap for restoration. The flip side of that is the priority for preservation that came out of those watershed assessments. And that was developed as a tool, as a targeting tool for land preservation, land acquisition, but it's really out of Public Works's hands in terms of that effort. We have not historically been in the business of property preservation or acquisition. And again, prior to this administration, there really wasn't a lot of interest in additional acquisition for properties, or at least among the prior administration. So that tool has existed, and that tool is still there if the resources were available for a broader acquisition effort or preservation effort. And I think we've worked, especially with Rick's staff, on some of the South County preservation efforts. We actually did a very detailed parcel by parcel analysis of priority for preservation in the Herring Bay and lower Patuxent watersheds, where it's very rural, the southern portion of the county, and that is potentially a tool for his staff who are in the rural preservation program. But like I say, I think there's a lot of opportunity for more aggressive preservation, although that's resource intensive, financial resource intensive. And there's an opportunity, I think, probably to work with planning and zoning to figure out how, as they develop some of their new approaches, our identification of areas that are high priorities for preservation could be folded into some of the tools that they use to do additional protection of natural resources and that sort of thing. So there's an opportunity, but I think, frankly, that needs leadership at the administration level, and somebody like Lori or somebody or Matt are in a position to help orchestrate across the variety of agencies to make sure all of these kinds of things get done, because it's much bigger than any single agency really can tackle at this point.
Thanks, Eric. And Steve, you had your hand up, and then I'll let the county executive finish it off if he has any comments.
I did, because I'm thinking I'm understanding Jim's question, and I think Jim is looking for like an overarching theme, and part of it would be what I want to concentrate just are some of the things below that theme that are that theme. There's a variety of techniques that we have recently implemented and will be implementing through the GDP and the region plans that add up to what I think you're looking at. Let's go back when I first got here in July of 2019. The county administration, the county executive had given some pretty strong recommendations, policy direction to the staff, and how they would begin to look at modifications to environmental features. And that has been implemented. And that has been implemented in a way that we could communicate it, be transparent to the public through a series of green notices. That's the way we communicate with our constituents when we explain how we're going to implement a new law or a new policy. Forest Conservation Act, a very large legislative package that was really, about a year ago, moving its way through the legislative process, has had a significant impact on development applications. How we look at modifications in a general sense has changed dramatically over how we've reviewed them in the past. You've probably heard me say modifications in this county, which is essentially a form of a variance that the planning and zoning officer can grant without going to the hearing examiner, without going to the Board of Appeals. There's tremendous power that resides in that position to grant variances to the code on almost everything. Historically, we approved about 95% of all the modifications requested. We're nowhere near that now. And what it's done is it's caused the development community to alter the way that they submit their applications. They no longer ask for anywhere near or the extent of modifications that they used to. And on occasion, we're faced with a situation in OPZ where we actually deny projects. We've done that 3 times in the last year or so. I'm going to say, you just heard of a new program about buying flood-prone properties. And last thing is something really most folks in Anne Arundel County won't understand because you haven't practiced it, is this concept of performance zoning, which is first mapping through, you're hiring professionals that we will check. We are hiring professionals. We have an offer into someone who is qualified that will come into our office and double check the developers' consultants to map all of the existing environmental features on a piece of property that is subject to a development application. That becomes the foundation of what can happen from a development standpoint. That is the core component of performance zoning, and it removes the need or the impetus to move forward with modifications. I'm sharing 5 examples of things that are occurring under this administration that are fundamentally different than the way we did work in the past. And that's if you want to say, the cornerstone of how we're going to create this overarching conservation plan for the county. And these are just the things that come to mind.
Thanks, Steve. And Executive?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing you said is how we're going to create this comprehensive conservation strategy. And I think, Jim, you've brought up this desire for something broader, where we really take a census of what we got and what we're trying to protect in this county. And I hope we're getting there. I mean, I hope you keep pushing, because I can't completely envision what you're envisioning, because you've done this work in the past, and I know that you're onto something, and I'm glad that you're on the CEC so that you can continue to push for that something. I think we're getting there with all these component pieces and the commitment to doing a comprehensive conservation strategy. But I know that you are going to continue to monitor and to hold our feet to the fire to get us there, wherever there is.
Yeah, and Jim, you want to join our implementation committee to keep an eye on us to make sure we're checking ourselves.
Well, let me just say this. I first of all,
and real quick, Jim, just to
I applaud all the efforts.
And
Steve, I think what you laid out is very helpful. I'm willing to volunteer to help in any way I can, but I think it's understanding that larger landscape, whether it's a region, whatever, and how this all adds up to achieving both the environmental and development goals that you all have, that would help the communities and the developers understand, that's what you want. That's what you're looking for, as opposed to the kind of, project by project, development by development battle that I think you're working your way through every day. That's all I'm trying to suggest.
Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate it. And again, apologies whenever I cut folks off trying to get through questions. We've got a few of them. So I'm going to do one that came across on the chat from actually my neighbor, Laura Lutz. Welcome, Laura. So thanks. My question is this. It sounds like a lot of the recommendations in the GDP will depend on a county council willing to pass them into law. How quickly is this administration ready to move on the regulatory policies actions that do not require legislation? I'll just say 1 minute or 10 seconds on that. We're already moving, and I think you heard from Steve Ziegler, we have been since day one. Stuart, do you want to touch on that at all?
Well, when you look in, in this part of the plan, there's a column, and it says there's performance measures, and there's also time frame, and there's the responsible department on every one of these 93 environmental proposals. And so you can see both the time frame, and some of them are ongoing. And I think that gives you a sense of, and I think the ones that are regulatory that we don't need to wait on the council on are ASAP.
I'll just mention that. Sorry, I'll just mention that several of these things, including, for instance, that floodplain acquisition of floodprone properties, are already underway. So it's, they're in the document, but they're actually already being executed to a certain extent. So it's not the lion's share, but there are some of them that are already being explored that way.
Yeah, and I'll just say what we've tried to do with these green notices and blue notices from inspections and permits is we've tried to tell you the regulatory actions we're taking without the county council. We're putting them down on paper so that the citizens can read them, the development community can read them, everyone can read them. So that's where you're going to see more action in the future as well. All right, I am going to open it up for Don Weller to speak. Don, welcome.
Hi, Matt. It's actually my wife, Debbie, has the question.
Hi. I had a question. Hi. The plan mentions the need for an overlay zone for Jazbez Branch, which is the only naturally reproducing population of native brook trout across the coastal plain region, which I'm sure you all know about Jazbez Branch. In the plan, I did not see any steps to achieve the overlay zone, which has been discussed for at least 10 or 12 years. It was recognized as a priority environmental goal in the 2003 Odenton Small Area Plan. It was included in the 2009 GDP. And again, one of the big concerns is, excuse me, that in the current plan, there's a lot of development going into Jazbez Branch, yet, we haven't given it any protection. So we keep talking about this, but now we have these no overlay, we have development pressure, and typically the developer wins, and we're going to lose more of Jazbez. How are we going to move forward with an overlay zone?
Steve's hand went up first.
So what I'm going to say is in this area, what I can promise you is that I will go back, we will talk to staff, and if we're going to make a recommendation for an overlay, we need to have the steps on how to achieve it. That's a relatively easy fix. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
And the developers don't always win. The Monticello Properties is near the Jazbez Branch, right? And they got a big fat no.
And I'll also say there is a sensitive resources policy overlay, big term, but it's a map of all of the resource areas that we care about and that we want to protect. And in those resource areas, you're right, you have to hold our feet to the fire and make sure that we pass regulations and policies and procedures to defend those places. But Jazbez Branch is, I believe, in that resource policy overlay. And now I'm going to move on to Sally Hornor.
Hi, greetings everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to reply to Deb Weller concerning the overlay zone for Jazbez. When I served on the Seven River Commission, and this was now maybe a dozen years ago, with Linda Vlavianos, we actually, with Gigerellis and numerous other county staff, we came up with an environmental overlay zone for Jazbez. So if you want to talk to Gigerellis, I think she has probably the copy of that. And the reason why it didn't go forward at the time, as I recall, our county council rep for Jazbez was Jamie Benoit. And he felt that he did not have the votes on the council to support that plan. So it was not brought forward. But it's there somewhere in someone's computer. And I have a hard copy of it. So it is there.
And that's just, thank you, Sally. That's just Dr. Hornor, that's just a little bit of the kind of expertise and experience that we have on the Citizens Environmental Commission. So I'm sure that Dr. Hornor will get me that hard copy or email copy. All right, I am going to open it up for Steve Miller. Welcome, Steve. You're on the air. Here, let me ask you to unmute. Oh. Well, maybe Steve has lost. Oh, there he is. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Matt. And thank you to County Executive Pittman and all the presenters tonight for doing this forum, and also for all the great work that's been done on getting to where we are right now with the GDP. I'd like to follow up with what Steve Ziegler was talking about earlier, and most recently County Executive Pittman, and that is that this plan will be measured, that the progress will be tracked, and we expect that there will be outcomes from doing all of that extra effort. I want to talk just a minute about this particular section we're talking tonight of the GDP, which is planning for the nature environment. In this particular section, there are 6 goals and 93 policies. There are 12 different directorates, many of them have been represented tonight here during this forum, bureaus and agencies that have been assigned as leads for various policies. Office of Planning and Zoning has the most, which is 29. The timeline for working solutions to the policies in the current draft is that 40% of these will be solved in the short-term time frame, 0 to 5 years, 16% midterm, and none in the long term. And as the county exec already mentioned, there are already a number of policies that are ongoing, and that's roughly 30%. In the past, there has been a problem in achieving some of the objectives that were in the other GDP because of the fact that there are so many fingers in the bowl when it comes to resources and responsibilities for environmental policies and actions. So in this particular execution of tracking and managing these 93 different policies, is Matt going to be the one who's overall in charge of bringing all these people together and to making this all happen?
Hi, this is Lori Rhodes. It will be a collaborative effort. I will oversee the plan to update the zoning codes with all of the land use directors, and Matt Johnston will be involved as well as Eric. So this is going to be a collaborative joint effort. The performance measures will be followed. We plan on having an implementation committee. We did not have any of these practices in place under the previous administration, which is why that plan basically sat on the shelf and led to all of the modifications and things that we're hearing about today.
And
Great.
Steve, I would definitely agree that part of the problem in the past with implementation has been that there are a lot of agencies involved. But I think another part of the problem has been that there hasn't been the political will to implement. And we can't guarantee the political will in the future. We can't even guarantee, I can't guarantee that the council is going to support all the legislative proposals that we have in here. But that's going to be partly up to if the community and the residents really buy into this plan and push the council, then the council, just like the forest conservation, will have no choice but to pass it. And future electeds, future county executives, even me, need to be held accountable. And I hate to even mention this, but part of the heavy influence that development interests have had on policy in the past has been based on the campaign contributions that they've given to the elected. So in this county, it's really easy to raise money to run for office if all the developers support you and they hold the fundraisers and they all kick in their maximum of $6,000, and all of their lawyers and all of everybody else does. And so, I've got a list of developers with applications pending that I don't accept money from. I hope others do as well. We are still working on legislation with the council, trying to get enough votes lined up to be able to pass a bill. We got state authorization to pass a bill to limit campaign contributions from developers when they have applications pending. That's something we have to continue to work on, I believe, if we're going to ensure that that our electeds really respond to the residents and the communities fairly on implementation.
Yeah.
Great.
And I would like to follow up on that by saying, I asked for specific language in the plan so that when we go forth with the council bill, we can refer to those policies and goals as something that they adopted. So that's kind of going to be my strategy, is using those goals as they're listed in the plan when we go forward with a bill to say this was what the council had adopted. But again, the council could change with another election, but that's kind of going to be part of my strategy.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm going to have to switch here to Jette Findsen, who will have the last question of the evening before we close out. So Jette, you are on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much for having this meeting and for everything you are doing for forest conservation and renewables. And I have one comment or question related to policy 16.3, support transition to renewable energy sources. One of the items is promote renewables on landfills and brownfields, and sort of in that shift to promote renewables on preferred sites that are not agriculture and forest. Would it be possible to also expand to rooftop support on commercial rooftop and reclaim mines, and broader than just landfills and brownfields?
Yes, please, but I'll let others answer the specifics.
Well,
thank you for asking that question. Yet I suspected that it was going to be along these lines. So thank you for keeping climate change at the front of our, and renewables at the front of our agenda. But I know Matt's working on that. Others may be as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll just tell you that the county executive has really directed the whole staff, and it's kind of my job to coordinate this, to drive and incentivize rooftop solar. And the only way we can do that is work with our state partners and our council to pass some incentives for rooftop solar so that it is more marketable versus agricultural-based solar. And also to look across all of our holdings as a county and see where we can place solar panels to, again, bring the market to bear and place the solar panels where we want them. And Steve, you were going to say a bit about that as well.
Just real quick, I'm going to give a couple of examples. In both Parole Town Center and Odenton Town Center, we have development techniques that allow more flexibility for a developer with a mixed use, somewhat relaxed standards if they apply to what we call our incentive program. Basically, the developer's asking, we need some relief from this or this, and it's not a modification. What is it the county would like us to do, or what can we offer in lieu of this thing? And one of the things we keep coming back with is we're looking for either solar or green roofs. And it's generating a lot of interest. We haven't seen a building created in my time here that incorporates that through this technique, but that is another way we're going to be at least partially successful in getting more solar. And again, I put green roof in the same category as solar. Very, very beneficial for a building. You know, it uses the land differently. It's very effective when you think about multifamily dwellings. In this area, we have several apartment complexes that have it, and they're very well done.
Thanks, Steve. And that concludes our audience question and answer portion of the agenda. So Stuart, County Executive, I wanted to hand it back to you for some final comments before we close out the evening.
Well, we could go on for hours doing this. I know you've got your Citizens Advisory and Environmental Commission meeting to finish up. I would love to be talking about these issues for the next hour or two. But on the renewables, I also just want to mention the great work that Matt and Central Service has done, putting together a plan to transfer our, I believe, 1,600 vehicles to electric as we start to replace them. And I'm really looking forward to seeing our police officers in electric, zippy little electric cars, and maybe even getting driven around in one. But it's it's so gratifying to me to have so many people in county government that that are really committed to a clean environment with life in it, life thriving, the diversity of life thriving in it. And I got to say, especially over at Plan and Zoning, when Steve came in, one of the reasons I hired him was because I stalked him online, and he spends a lot of his free time camping, and I knew that he cared. I knew that he loved nature, and that's a plus. And then I found out that he hired all these people in long range planning that, all of their training was in environmental studies, and clearly that they'd gotten into this planning work because they they love the natural world and believe that human beings can live in harmony with it without destroying it. So this is really important work, and thank you all for being part of it.
Thank you, everybody. That concludes the first of 3 virtual town halls. We hope you'll enjoy it. We hope you will join us for the second 2. And please visit the Plan2040 website, download the documents, count the policies as your county executive did earlier today, but then comment on them and send your comments in. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.